Assalamu alaikum. Hope you will be fine. If you are working in the FMCG industry, then this video is very helpful and interesting for you to understand the difference between the food defense and food fraud. So first of all, we discuss the background of food defense and food fraud. Do you know the difference between food fraud and food defense? These two requirements comes from FSSC additional requirements. Food fraud is the additional requirement of clause number 2.1.4.6, and the food defense is the additional requirement clause number 2.1.4.5. So these are the two requirements that comes under the umbrella of FSSC 22000 when you are implementing them with ISO 22000 and the technical specifications requirements and then other additional requirements. So these two requirements comes from FSSC 22000. So now we discuss what is the food fraud. Now we develop our understanding about the food fraud. As from the name, food fraud. Fraud means fraudulent and intentional replacement, dilution, or addition of a product or raw material or adulteration of the product or material aimed at financial gain, increasing the product apparent value or reducing its production cost. One example of this illegal activity which occurs in the food sector mostly is the fraud in milk, which is done in a variety of ways. Food fraud examples. Now we discuss the examples of food fraud. So adding water to increase the volume is the food fraud. Adding restorative ingredients like formaldehyde or melamine to hide the addition of water and act as a preservative. The number 3, addition of preservatives such as hydrogen peroxide to destroy the microorganisms or prevent them from multiplying, making milk more durable. Addition of neutralizing agents such as sodium hydroxide to hide the acidity of microbial fermentation. So we have understanding about the food fraud. Food fraud is done economically by motivated person to gain profit. So we have to consider the food frauds when we are implementing the compliances of FSSC 22000. These are some food fraud types: grey market, substitution, concealment, mislabeling, unapproved enhancement, counterfeiting, and dilution. These are the different types of food fraud that have to face in the market in future, and as well as we are currently considering these all requirements when we are implementing the FSSC 22000. So these are also food fraud. Top 10 worst offenders. Number 1 is milk, olive oil, honey, saffron, fish, coffee, orange, apple, black pepper, and tea. These are the 10 worst products which are very vulnerable regarding food fraud. This is a visual example of food fraud. So the red color apple is coloring to hide the real picture of color. So this is like a food fraud. These are visual examples of food fraud. So like this we see we are painting the outside and saying this is a pure ghee, but inside this is not a pure ghee. So this is the true example of food fraud. So another example we can see visually, addition of water in the food is called dilution. fraud type is dilution, adding water in the milk. So these are the vulnerable products. Milk is mostly vulnerable product in the market. So this which type of food fraud can be done in the milk? So this is called adulteration in milk. It can be added water. Water can be added, soap powder, chemical, color agents. So these are all the adulterations in the milk that is called food fraud. So another example visually we see that adulteration of food. I think so we have the clear understanding about the adulteration of food. Another example is visual inspection. These are called food fraud. I hope now the food fraud concept is very clear to all of you. Professor is describing about the food fraud in lab and developing the understanding about the food fraud. So now we comes to the next requirement is food defense. What is food defense? Food defense focus on security, protecting the food supply from intentional contamination. So from name it is clear we have to secure our product from intentional contamination, that the purpose is to cause the harm to customer or to the FMCG industry. So formally we develop our understanding about the food defense. From name it is clear that food defense is the protection of food products from intentional contamination or adulteration by biological, chemical, physical, or radiological agents introduced for the purpose of causing harm. So, food defense, we have to very careful about our product. So, can anybody is intentionally add anything to your product to cause the harm of the customer health or to disrupt the economy of industry? So employees are the first line of defense because they are involved in the preparation of food, and also some people involved in the supply chain to deliver the product to the customer. So employees are the first line of defense. So now these are some visual explanation to understand the concept of food defense. What is food defense? Like this visual inspection, the army man's protecting the food. So we have also protect the food that we are preparing and delivering to the customer. We have the requirement to deliver our product safely to the customer that does not harm his health. Food defense. I hope these visual explanation clear your understanding about the food defense. We have to understand and develop the plans to protect our foods by authorizing the peoples. So conclusion is that food fraud program prevents the contamination aimed at economic gain. So we can say food fraud is done to gain the economic gain, while the food defense program prevent any sabotage and it is done intentionally to cause the harm. So this is the clear difference between food defense and food fraud. Let's again we have eyesight on food defense and food fraud. Food fraud is done intentionally to gain the profit, and the food defense program is made to prevent the any sabotage or intentional contamination to the products.